I put this at the beginning of the movie because I wanted to maybe get a laugh and let people know I'm not taking this so seriously, and they don't have to either. They can just enjoy it. My dad made that sign for me in 1982, and it hung on my backyard office there. Joe Carlock did that artwork for the studio. In fact, Joe and I were both in Mrs. Brown's art class, and we lost her too soon, and I'll always be indebted to her for what she taught me. I wanted to do this commentary because I wanted to talk about the creative process.
Do you remember art class?
Okay, you hear that question by Liz? Listen to this question by Dorette.
You remember Coach Herb Stevens?
I'm going to come back to those questions as I talk about how everyone who worked on this movie, from the cast to the people behind the scenes, how they all touched it, shaped it, and how we're all extensions of one another. And how I learned from this experience and from this very talented and creative cast to try and not control everything so much as director. But when you have a talented cast, and Liz and Dorette are two examples I'm going to talk about, let them contribute in their own unique ways, and the movie will come out better than I imagined, even if it means a little more work than I planned. I discovered through making this movie, at this point in my life, I could focus less on the outcome and more on just enjoying the process, enjoying the work. The other thing I wanted to do with this commentary is to thank people. I'll start with Jamie Johnson. He was kind of our leader, started the ball rolling. I want to thank the entire event staff, put the reunion together, and just everybody that's had a hand in this DVD, directly or indirectly. And, couldn't have done it without everybody's contribution. But what possessed me to spend a year of my life doing this? Well, I guess it started with Paschal friends. Back in 1978, Brian Brooks and I, we started doing creative projects in a little backyard shed that my dad built. In 79, David Whitley came along. In 81, Chris Freeland came along, and there we were, Suburbia Studios, all of us Paschal Panthers. And we made movies throughout high school and college, and we kept the studio alive all these years. And I thought it would be great to, I don't want to use the word crowning achievement, but, really do something to put an exclamation mark on our studio. If not Hollywood quality, at least approaching Hollywood quality, with all Paschal contributors. Also, the personal aspect of it appealed to me. When I do a job for a studio, I just do my skill set, very narrow focus. And in Hollywood, the talent level is so great that on a technical level, virtually anyone could do my job. But only I could create this reunion movie this way, and create the DVD this way. And so it was the personal aspect. If I can't use my talent after all these years to bring a little happiness to the people I love and my friends, what's it all been for? But even more, I had something I wanted to prove to myself, that I was a complete filmmaker after all these years, that I had the skill set. I never made a documentary before, and I'll touch on this in a few minutes. It's an entirely different skill set. I didn't know who was going to come forward and want to be in this movie, or what they were going to say, or how I was going to piece it all together. I had no clue the odyssey that I was in for, particularly authoring the DVD. And so I wanted to prove to myself that I had the ability to do it. And as I planned it, I found that it was the things that didn't go according to plan, or the limitations of the project, that actually made it better. As I talk about in the Making of documentary, I didn't shoot at the reunion events very much. It's loud, it's dark, people are there to have a good time. Nobody wants a camera stuck in their face, and if you do, they're not. I don't know the quality of what people would have said, because I'd be putting them on the spot, make them self-conscious. But this way, we had the cast, and then that's why it's a good movie, because the cast really came through. The quality of their thought, what they put on the screen, is what made this a good movie. And I don't think we would have had that if we tried to shoot it at the reunion events. Plus, the cast didn't always do it the way I wanted. Sometimes they did it better, and I'll talk about that as we go along. But when I say I was the only one that could make this DVD this way, I don't mean to imply that I did it all by myself. Mary Jane Cardona Lopez, I asked if she would help, because she has such enthusiasm, such spirit. And we start working, and I'm here in California, and she's in Texas. It makes it really hard just communicating, and get it with clarity. And, I'd said, can you do this? with Photoshop, and she did. It wasn't the way I would have done it, but I wasn't upset at all. But she felt really bad, and I said to her, Mary Jane, I will take you. I will work with you any day over the world's expert in Photoshop. And I told her why, and I'm completely sincere, because she has the will to want to help. This took a year. This wasn't something that we did when it was only fun or we did it on the weekends. We worked on this nearly every day for a year. And she had the will to do it. And that's more valuable than Photoshop expertise. That's more valuable than technical knowledge, to have the passion to do it. And I will take Mary Jane Cardona Lopez any day over somebody who has Photoshop knowledge but doesn't respect the work, doesn't appreciate the opportunity. And so I told her that, and she really made a lot of contributions to this DVD, as you can see by looking at it. She's got her own featurette. She did her own commentary for the making of. And so that was something that I realized, okay, look, you need to utilize your classmates, if they want to help, and Mary Jane did. So when we, first considered this, I guess it was June, I was still thinking about it by myself, and I put out the call, to anybody in our class. I extended it to anybody from the class of 83. It didn't matter if they graduated or if they dropped out. If they had started with us in 1979 and were on course, that I put the call out and got a great response. But it wasn't until, as I mentioned in the making of, that Susan Foster got her mother to agree to let us use her house that the whole thing took off. And so grateful to the cast, who not only they all showed up on time, they were all prepared. And one of the greatest challenges of this project was we only had 5 hours to do 16 interviews, and so that made it tough because I couldn't go back and reshoot stuff. We kind of did what we did, and that's what I had. And this was the toughest project I've ever done. Doesn't matter if it's something for myself, something for Hollywood. I've done hundreds. By far, this is the toughest, and I'll tell you why. Because it's the first time I ever tried to do a true documentary. When I write a movie, I write it, and either I do it or somebody else is going to do it, but however it gets made, they're going to follow the script. And then once it's shot, it's edited the way it's shot, and it's shot the way it's written. So there's not a lot of discovery there in terms of fundamentally piecing it together. There's other kinds of discovery, but not that. With this, there was nothing written. Sure, I asked similar questions of everyone. Who's your favorite teacher? And you have fond memories and that kind of thing. But not everybody wanted to do that. Bart Gutierrez wanted to do his own thing. And it wasn't what I had in mind, but I went with it. And although it took me longer in the editing room to put it together, ultimately it made the movie better. And I want to thank Bart for his contributions to this picture. The entire cast, when I let them go and do their own thing, they made the movie better, So once you shoot, you have all these things that have no connection, really. And you have to come back and figure out how to make a good dramatic movie out of that. And as we go along, I'm going to talk about some of the connections that came through and how some of the things that the cast did ended up hugely affecting how good our movie was in ways that I hope I can point them all out. But even if I just give a couple, that'll give a sense of, for example, in the opening, you just see shots of the school. And those are just still pictures. I mean, I put the traffic noise over it to try to create the illusion that it's a movie, that I was really out there with the camera, but they're just stills. And for a long time, I started cutting the picture in August. And for a long time, that opening, it just kind of sat there, just a still picture, and I couldn't figure it out. And one day I was talking to my friend, Liz means cook. And forgive me, I'm just going to refer to everybody their high school names. Liz means. And I should say that was something that I consciously did in the movie. If you look, when everyone's named, it just has their high school name. Even if they changed their name or changed most of their name, I still put their high school name. And that's because someone watching this, that's who they identify them as. It would do no good to refer to Chris Turnipseed as Chris Clark, because before I started this movie, I didn't know that he changed his name. Yes, I will honor him and call him Chris Clark. And I want to thank him for what he did at the 10th reunion, organizing that slideshow, because that was passed off to Kelly Cato, and she passed it on to me. So I thank Kelly Cato in the making up for sending me that, but Chris Clark was really also a big force in that. But to get back to what I was saying, I used everybody's high school name, and that's why. Plus, it takes up less space on the screen. I can make the letters bigger, and they go by really fast. You only have a few seconds to read them. So that was a decision I made, right or wrong. But to get back to my friend Liz, I was talking about the opening of the movie and how it just kind of sat there, shots of Paschal from the street. I was talking to Liz on the phone, and there's nothing quite like, I just heard Liz's voice again after it's been a long time, and it just took me right back to high school in a very sweet way. It's like when Mary Jane Cardona would send me stuff for the movie, she would always write me these handwritten notes, and it's just the coolest thing, because I'd get the note and they'd just take me right back to high school. There's Mary Jane Cardona's handwriting. And so I have all this stuff in a box. Kelly, when she sent me the slides, they were in an old 35 millimeter slide Kodak carousel box. The carousel wasn't there, but the slides weren't there. And so I decided to use that box to collect everything that everyone sent me. So anyway, I was talking to Liz on the phone, and I realized, wow, her voice just took me back. Why not take her voice and put it over the first shot in the movie? And then I'm like, well, I need another one. And the time we taped with Dorette, I told everybody, okay, I'm going to ask you questions, but you need to answer in complete sentences. Because at that time, I had no plans, no desire to be a host. I wanted to remove myself from the movie. So in other words, I wanted to say, who's your favorite teacher, Dorette? And I wanted Dorette to say, my favorite teacher was whoever, Coach Herb Stevens. But Dorette, she didn't do that. She said, do you remember Coach Herb Stevens? In one sense, she did what I asked. It was a complete sentence, but it wasn't phrased the way that I wanted, that I knew I could make the connection in the editing room. But again, I went with it. And the fact that she asked that question and phrased it as a question made it possible for me to use Liz in the opening, because I had Dorette as a second question. And when you have more than one, you can do a sequence. So when Dorette phrased it as a question, I think it's right here.
Do you remember Coach Herb Stevens?
Yeah, when she did that on the set that day, something I didn't think I wanted, she ended up giving me a piece of my opening to the movie with Liz. And that same question gave me a transition from Susan Foster. And Dorette also gave me another great transition here. This shot from the soap opera happened because Dorette remembered it. So I went and found it and put it in. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that when Dorette asked, remember Coach Herb Stevens, and then she talked about the soap opera, that was a perfect lead-in for these TV shows that you're seeing now. Okay, and then that, of course, led into the movies. But I didn't have to come on and say, as the host of the show, now that we've heard some crazy hijinks from high school, let's look at some TV shows and movies that were popular when we were in high school. Dorette did it for me seamlessly, and you don't even know you made a transition. And so once Dorette did that, and the other thing, I could never figure out how to go, how did I want to get into the TV shows? What was my lead-in from Coach Herb Stevens? Because when I had interviewed Susan Foster, she had talked about cutting class, but she couldn't remember the teacher's name, or at least she didn't say it at the time. And so later, I'm editing the movie and I call up Susan. And that's another great thing. call up all these people from high school, that I didn't know that well, but I always wished I did, and now I can call them up and talk to them. It's wonderful. This is a great fringe benefit of making this movie, because I have more friends than I had when I started it, which is really cool. So I called up Susan Foster, and I said, do you remember who you were talking about? And she said, yeah, it was Herb Stevens, as we look at Star Trek here. And it's ironic, just to break in, that's the only clip that I chose. Everybody else from our class had chimed in on Facebook. I said, give me your favorite TV shows, your favorite movies. And it was a lot of fun, figuring out which movies to use, then finding just a few seconds, the clip within the movie to use. In some cases, I couldn't get the movie I wanted or the clip I wanted, but it turned out well. But I was talking to Susan Foster, and when she said it was Coach Herb Stevens that had, scared her to death, I'm like, wait, that's a great transition, but she doesn't say it. So I had to use a graphic and ask the question. But it worked. It's a great transition. And again, here with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, he says his name is Mr. Hand, and right there I say Mrs. Blaylock. So we're going from the name of one teacher to the name of another, and that's how you get into the favorite teachers. But this doesn't that happened because I don't remember who said Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But whoever chimed in on Facebook and suggested Fast Times at Ridgemont High, they shaped the flow of this movie, because they changed how I pieced it together, just as Susan Foster did or Dorette did. I remember, once I had Liz saying, do you remember art class? And then I realized Dorette had asked me about Herb Stevens. I knew I had my opening, but I never could figure out, I'm real big on get your opening and get your ending and get those two things solid. And then once you do that, you can just work on the middle and make that good. But you've got your in, you've got your out. Never could figure out the ending. I mean, how do you end a bunch of interviews about people talking about high school? And then one day, I was looking at Sophie Bramble's footage. And I have to say, Sophie, she really did a lot for this movie just in the 15. I don't even think she took her full 20 minutes. But the things she said, the way she articulated, like Daphne, as we look at her, just so articulate. And Mary Jane, too, that you don't have to edit a lot. So anyway, I was watching Sophie, and she was talking about, how close we all were, and how our generation's different from the generation now, and I realized this is the end of the movie. Sophie has nailed this perfectly, but it's only obvious once I figured it out. And I think that's a lot of where the magic of movies comes from. It seems to flow naturally, and it seems obvious. Of course you do it that way, but it's not at all. And that was the big trick with this movie, getting my beginning, my middle, and my end, and figuring that out. So once I had my beginning and my ending, then it was just a question of connecting all the way through to the middle. But this is why I say that Sophie is an extension of me, or that Susan Foster is an extension of Dorette, because the things that they talk about. And that's what's so great about the creative process, that you never know how it's going to come out. That's going to be exasperating too. But I just love discovering how a movie comes together. And a lot of that was in the planning, even before I started editing, how I was going to do the green screens. So I got, say, Susan here. I got all of her footage that I was going to use edited. And then I did that for everybody. And once I had everyone segregated, I did their composite green screens separately, like Susan's in the hall by the little theater. And once I had everyone done, then I broke them apart and mixed and matched them and started putting the movie together. And I really got to know the footage well. But I really had to go in and mine this footage and try to find the nuggets, and not just when somebody said something, just say, okay, that's what they said on the surface, but how can it really connect? And this is the middle of our movie now that we're into with Bob, Reed, and Bart. And Bob and I have been friends for 30 33, 34 years now. And Bob sent a lot of slides and a lot of photos. And without him in this picture, I mean, I think he kind of legitimizes our movie in a way because, he was one of our teachers and he came to do it. He said it was a privilege for him to do it. It's a privilege to have him in it. And for me, it kind of just gives it a little bit more legitimacy. But this section with Bob and Bart, they talked for, 20 minutes. And just to cut that down, I don't know, what is that, 3 minutes or something like that? That's a long time in a movie like this. But really just, because we are right in the middle of the movie now, and this really just jazzes that center part. You start out and you're all excited, you're watching a movie, and as you get into the middle, sometimes it can lag. But having Bob and Bart in the middle really gave us an anchor so we could move from the beginning to the middle and on to our ending with Sophie. Just everybody who worked on this show. This is the funny thing that happened that I never saw coming, and I fought against it the whole way. This is the biggest challenge of the movie, beyond connecting it together, would be this idea of friends attract. And so when I put out the call to anyone in our class who wanted to come be in front of the camera, and we're going to use a green screen, it's going to be lights, you're only going to have a certain amount of time to do it. When you tell everybody this, it can kind of be a little bit daunting. And naturally what happens? Mostly it's my friends that want to do it because they're comfortable with me, and friends gravitate toward friends. And so I decided I need to call some folks that are beyond, my sphere that I knew in high school. And I had known Dorette, and, but we'd never really talked a lot. We just ran in different circles. And so I called Dorette and I said, do you want to come do this movie? Because I think she was the vice president of our class, or I could have that wrong. But so I needed to get a different point of view beyond that. And so I did that with Julia Whicher. I didn't really know her well, but I enjoyed her posts on Facebook, so I called her, and she graciously agreed to do it. But the funny thing happened, so I said, okay, well, I'm gonna defuse this idea, because I didn't want it just to be, here's the Paschal Class of 1983 reunion movie about David and his friends, And so what happens? We get to Susan Foster's mother's house, and this cast of, I don't think all 16 of us were there that day, but more than a dozen. And what do we start doing? It becomes a love fest among the cast. Sophie talks about how much she loves Mary Jane, and I talk about how much I love Liz, because Liz was my best pal at Paschal, and then all of a sudden I get it back to California and it's shot, and I'm like, it went from my fear of it being a movie about me and my friends, now it was a love fest between these 15 people. So, which is not a bad thing, but, I wanted to do a class movie that the whole class could, enjoy this. So, what do you do then? Well, I'm on the screen here talking about a letter. I ask people to write letters. And things like that. I just wanted to say, you just saw some of the still photography. A quick note to Joe Lopez, Mary Jane's husband, who... I want to thank all our still photographers. But Joe, I don't know if he had an auto winder or what he did, but he took a lot of shots in succession. And I found that those were very useful in transitions from one scene to another. And that's Joe Lopez. So again, Joe Lopez becomes an extension. You look at the Intellivision football game. Brian and I, we taped all our games. I have hours and hours of our Intellivision football games. But just to say a word about, as the host of this show, I tried to say as little as possible. You'll notice I start talking about Intellivision football, and then I just go quiet here. I want the pictures to speak for themselves. I tried never to ask questions on camera unless I was clarifying. I just wanted to stay quiet as the host and let the class tell the story for themselves. So how do you get the movie to open up? Well, again, I asked for pictures. And this is where I really got to hand it to the class of 83. I mean, people are busy. They've got lives. They've got jobs. They've got kids. No one wants to go digging around for old photos and then scan them and have to send them snail mail if they're slides or even emailing pictures. And so I really want to thank everyone who took the time to locate pictures and send them to me, because that was one way we could really open up the movie to the rest of the class. And in particular, I want to thank Patricia Renee Lopez. She posted some pictures. One became the discard for the DVD, another was the sub-menu for an annual, and I could go on and on. But she really gave me hope one day when she posted those, and like, there are pictures out there, and it just helped. You know, I talk so much about transitions. Pictures help make transitions, and that's, I guess I should have introduced this idea earlier in the commentary, but that's what storytelling is all about. That's what communication is all about. You have an idea, you develop that idea, then you make a transition to the next idea. So it becomes all about ideas and transitions to the next ideas, and the transitions should be seamless. So let's take this scene with Jamie Johnson here, the little Abner. We, trying to track down these photos of just Erica Flores singing. Jamie makes comment, Erica Flores singing. Well, that throws our whole focus of that particular package in a different. We've got to get a shot of Erica Flores somehow. And so this becomes a focus. And that's how people who weren't able to contribute for the movie are in the movie, because someone mentioned them and we were able to get pictures. Now, this chair that Jamie's in, earlier in the movie he's in a different chair, but this was the first thing we shot. And the chair was so big we couldn't see the green screen. And that's why Jamie switches chairs. Early in the movie he's in one and there he's in another. And here's the scene with Mary Jane Cardona. If you get a chance, there's a featurette called Anatomy of a Scene. It's in the special features section where I go into detail about how this scene was created. But I want to, aside from thanking Mary Jane, I would just like to say thank you for putting yourself out there, Mary Jane. We call this in my business, this scene, this is money. That's what we refer to it as, because this is as good as gold. When someone is willing to open up and put themselves out there in a sincere way on the screen, and it's just, I'm very touched by it. And I think it really made our movie something special, gave it a little more emotional authenticity. And I had no idea that Liz was going to spring this on me. And I was like, what? And I had completely forgotten about it. That drawing. Now, of course, I hadn't completely forgotten about Liz. I mean, had the hots for her. But she was my best pal, and I want to say some more about that. But I have to say, I've got to give a shout out to David Whitley. He was a senior when I was a freshman. And, I'm no great artist. And, David Whitley helped me airbrush, helped me learn to paint, helped me learn to draw. And he had a lot to do with that drawing of Liz, because without David Whitley, I couldn't have done it. Now, I can give you an example of how Mary Jane and I worked. This sequence was fun. I told Mary Jane, send me a list of some current events that happened while we were in high school, and I'll make a package out of them. And she did. It turned out great. I think I added a couple, but that's Mary Jane making a list. Another big challenge, the movie was a challenge, but authoring the DVD, that was something, I never grew up wanting to learn how to author DVDs. Every menu had to be designed. Every word had to be typed. All the links, I had to figure out, what menu goes where. When you're on a menu and you're using your arrow keys to go up, all the little things have to line up right. When a movie's over, where does the DVD take you? What menu does it drop you out on? The Easter eggs, all these things. It seems obvious when you use it, you don't think about it. But it was a real challenge, and it was part of what I was trying to prove to myself that I could do. When I look back and I see this movie, it reminds me, and I hope it's for everyone will have different cues, but that's why I tried to put in so many different things, because I wanted the way it becomes a movie greater than about me and my friends or about the cast is exactly with what Durette's talking about here, and this is one of the nicest things. I screened this for my aunt, Lynn Prater, and she's a Paschal graduate from many years ago. In fact, the first year it was at Forest Park, I think she was there. And she really nodded during what Durette was saying about, getting past the Facebook status. And one of the things that my aunt said to me after she'd seen the movie was, David, it's comforting to know that your class has come to the same conclusions and feelings that my class did, and probably all the classes. I still say that nobody is as close as our class. In fact, it's funny. I was talking to Bob Reed, and we were on camera, and I said, "Okay, Bob, I'm going to put you on the spot, And I asked him, where our class ranked. And he gave me an answer. He didn't avoid it at all. It was really interesting. Something that my wife, who's a university professor, has also told me. She's experienced. Bob said it took him several years to learn how to teach the creative writing class, for example. When he first started out, he didn't teach it in a circle. And, he said that he had a favorite class before he taught in a circle, and then we were his favorite class during another evolution of learning to teach the class. Then there was another favorite class after that. So there's no simple answer to anything I'm learning. Doing this movie and interviewing everybody, it's been so illuminating. And, when I look at the movies that I've done, and is this one of my favorite movies, I can give a similar answer to Bob Reed. Yes, this is my favorite movie for the situations that I'm learning about now. I said this was the most challenging movie that I've ever been a part of. In a lot of ways, it was hard, but in a lot of ways, we got really lucky. There's always technical problems when you're shooting a movie. So many things could have gone wrong. People could have had car trouble on the way, or there could have been an electrical blackout. Things just couldn't have gone as well. The only technical problem we had when we got to Susan Foster's house, or her mother's house, is that my primary microphone, my Sennheiser, stopped working. And so I had to use a little backup mic, a peanut mic. And so the sound isn't what I had hoped it would be. But other than that, I can't complain. So it's just been such an odyssey from then until this moment. Now these preschool pictures or whatnot, just so great. And this crush sequence, this talking about an extension, back to this theme of extensions. I never knew how to get from the crush scene, because I felt like we had to have something about football, because you just do. And so Jeff Coffey was never originally in the cast, but, Jamie Mathesino, married to Tony, we've been friends since the first grade. And so we go way back. And one night she called me up and said, I'm going over to a party where that little black book. I told Daphne I was doing that sequence, and Daphne said, you better ask your wife permission before you do that. And she was right. But Jamie Mathesino called me and said, I'm going over to a party, and Jeff Coffey's going to be there. Because I told her she wanted to know who was the most girls had said were their crush. Said, do you want me to interview him? And I'm like, can you? And she said, yeah. And so her and Tony did that interview with Jeff Coffey. Did a great job. But when Jeff said, and I should pause here for a second, showing Sarah's entry in the little black book right there, it had her address when we were in high school. And I called up Sarah and I said, is there anyone still living there related to you? Can I use that address? And it took months and months just to get clearances for everything in this movie. And you have to vet everything, like things you would never think about. And so Yeah, there we are with Jeff. And the one line I told Jamie that she had to get was have Jeff say, "Yes, I'm here." I don't think they knew what that was about, but, because it would anchor him. And so he did this interview, and it wasn't until I never could figure out how to get to the football. Serious question. And he asked this. I asked this question here, or Jamie asked it. Somebody, I don't even know how they knew to ask this, because somebody must have been at the party that was in the cast and told him these were the questions I'm asking. But when he said Coach Wood, I'm like, wow, there's the transition to the football. And here we are. And I took that shot right before my wife and I left. We had just enough time to swing to the parking lot, back to the field house there, and that's when I got that shot. But that got me to the football segment. And then once I was there, this is another thing I mentioned earlier about Kelly Cato. If I hadn't asked Dorette to be in the movie, Dorette wouldn't have mentioned to Kelly Cato that she did it, and Kelly Cato wouldn't have said, "Oh, I have a box of slides." That was one thing I kept telling Mary Jane Cordona, because I was asking for pictures. I was posting on Facebook all the time, pictures. And I said, "Mary Jane, it's so frustrating because somewhere in somebody's closet is a box of pictures, and it's the mother lode. We got to find it." And then one day, Dorette calls me and says, "Kelly, I think Kelly has some slides." And there it was. And so those slides helped build that football sequence. Now, again, Daphne, how do you get to this stuff about Daphne? And then, we're moving toward the end of the movie now. And so we want to get a little nostalgic and maybe talk about some regrets. So Daphne talks about her parents, her father taking her to games. So you segue out of the football into that. So this is the discovery. This was the puzzle. I mean, editing all the dialogue and mixing it and all that, I can do that. But figuring out this puzzle, and getting the pieces all together, that is what I creatively live for. To see this completed DVD and the feeling that I get knowing that I created that. I mean, you can't buy that. $1 million couldn't buy that. And there's just no feeling like it. It's funny. I get nervous doing a lot of things, but I don't get nervous making movies. The stress comes from something else. In this case, I never even thought about it. But when I work on a picture or a project, say when I worked something for Paramount Studios, they back all that up. I don't have to worry about it. I just have to do my job. If the stuff gets lost, it's so what? I'll get paid overtime. It's not my worry. But all of a sudden, I've got this footage on my camera in Texas, so I've got to back that up. I've got to get it home safe. And then something happened that I never expected. This is in DVD quality, but it's actually in high definition. Maybe someday we can do a Blu-ray, because it really looks beautiful on Blu-ray. But the project started blooming because everything's in high definition, and so before I knew it, it was 50 gigs, and I got a little USB thumb drive, and I stuck it in there, and I would carry that around in my pocket. But then it became 100 gigs, and then once I had all the movies made, and I was trying to author the DVD, I never tried to do something of this magnitude before, and I kept getting corrupt files. It's a flaw in the software. Plus my inexperience. I mean, I actually had to take a couple of classes to learn how to do some of this stuff. When I made that boast I could do it in a year, well, yeah, but I had to learn. I had to really push myself. And so what I had to start doing was, because I lost a month of work, I had to go back and redo. And so I would work on the DVD and try to render it and burn a disc. And if it did that, I would save that into another file. And then go back to the other file, and if that ever got corrupt, I could at least go back to the file where I was instead of having to start all over. But that's 100 gigabytes every time you save it. And so I had to get a 2 terabyte drive. And then I realized, wait a second, you've got to get another 2 terabyte drive to back up that 2 terabyte drive. And not only that, you've got to get that other 2 terabyte drive out of your house. It just was nuts because you put in all this work And then the thing that was stressing me out was backing it up because I kept having corrupt file issues and stuff that I'm not even going to get into. But that was really, really a challenge. And it's a relief not to have to worry about storing and backing up that data anymore. Every time I'm going to open the work file, that it's going to say corrupt, error, and that's the movie. Still, I'm sad that it's coming to an end. This commentary is the last thing I'm going to do, and so it's starting to be over. But every movie it's kind of like a flower. You start it, you grow it, and you don't know how it's going to bloom. And there's all these petals and discoveries that you make, and then by the time you guys watch this DVD, I'm going to be on to another movie or another book, and this one will be dying to me. As the flower blooms for you, it'll be wilting for me. But, every movie is a time capsule, and it's never going to come together quite this way again. And, I never get bored doing movies. I never stop learning. Every movie has a different set of challenges, a different set of personalities, a human factor to deal with. It never becomes dull because I'll never know it all. My apprenticeship, it's for life. But every so often, I think this is made like something 320 something movies now. Every so often, I do one that's really special and a privilege to work on. And it's a privilege to have my name up on that screen as the producer and director of the class of 1983 reunion movie. I can watch a lot of the movies that I make, and I want to thank the cast again. There they all are. I can watch a lot of the movies that I make, but it's very rare that I can sit down and watch a movie and not think about the technique or the special effect I had to use to create the movie, but just enjoy it as a movie I might go to the theater and see. And it's rare that happens in a movie that I make. And by the way, I just wanted to show the green screens during the end credits just to say, we all really weren't at Paschal. Weren't trying to deceive anybody. It's just part of the fun. But at the same time, I can look at this, and it is like we're all back at Paschal. That's the gift that making this movie has given me. And I hope when the DVD is finished and all of you get it, it will give you that same gift. And I hope also you'll take a second to go to the slideshow and listen to Rick's full performance of the song. I hated that I had to pot his vocals down to start the bloopers, or the outtakes, but it was already this way when Rick recorded that, and I heard it and wanted to put it in, and so his full version is in the slideshows. But as we end here, I just want to say something. I've been making movies with Suburbia Studios for more than 30 years now, and I've always believed that if you give somebody the opportunity in an environment that's free of ridicule, and they believe that they have something worthwhile to express, that everyone has creative ability. And I don't mean creative ability in your day job. I'm talking about artistic creative ability for its own sake. And the class of 1983 is absolute proof of that. It was the founding principle of our studio, and it's still alive today. Everyone has creative ability. It's creative faith. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do the job every day with the faith that if I do my job, some power greater than myself is going to make it come out okay. I talked about the connections and being an extension of that's creative faith, and not only a higher power, but in each other and the extensions that we are to each other. And this movie is a perfect example of a class coming together after 30 years and producing something very special. And if anyone out there has been putting off a creative project or always wanted to try something creative and you're not sure what to do, contact me. I'm never too busy for someone from the class of 1983. My email is davidallenhall@juno.com, davidallenhall@juno.com. And as I take my leave of you, I just want to say, This has been a great experience. Thanks, everybody.